Hello, everyone, and welcome to the keynote address for the New England Graphic Medicine Virtual Summit. I'm your co-host and organizer, A. David Lewis, and it is my pleasure to be able to introduce our guest today. I want to say one thing at the outset, if I may, point of personal privilege. When I read Brian Fies' Mom's Cancer, I was most struck by the very last page. This is not to say that it wasn't a wonderful work across every page. Very revealing, very helpful, very intimate. But the last page did something that I have not experienced in any other medium. And it made me reflect on the power of comics and the comic book medium. In my edition, we follow Brian and Mom, his mother, who has cancer, the whole family, through her cancer treatment. If you have not read this book previously, I strongly suggest it. Spoilers are off, so I'll tell you that she does actually survive the cancer treatment, right? And goes on to live her life. And I've never, prior to today, met Brian. I suppose connecting virtually counts as meeting.
Yep. These days,
I never had the opportunity to meet his mother, but I feel I know them. And when I came to the last page, the sort of epilogue page, revealing that she had indeed passed away, not from cancer, but from other complications, I was struck in such a way that this wasn't just caring about a character or caring about a biographical figure, as you would in a docudrama. I had absorbed this person into my mind. I had animated her. I had started to have a visceral feeling about her struggles, and to have, and I don't mean to put this in any light way, to have the rug pulled out from underneath me, not only that she had died, but that it wasn't from this particular struggle, but ongoing health concerns. It struck me that no other medium could have made me embrace this, visualize it, care about it, the way that a comic like this could, a comic masterfully done could. I cannot picture it in film when it's moving at its own pace. Even if it's a documentary and these are not actors, there's still lighting, there's still camera angles. I couldn't picture it in prose. I couldn't picture it in dance, sculpture. It was all at once a incredible narrative experience, but it also reminded me of what we're doing here. It reminded me of what comics can do, how they can connect us, how they can let us feel, especially in medical circumstances, other people's lives. And so, without further ado, I'm truly delighted that we could have Brian Fies here with us today. He has been honored many times over, not just for his work on Mom's Cancer, but also more recently for A Fire Story, which is an Eagle Award nominee, even as we speak. Mr. Fies, thank you so much for being us with here today. I yield the stage.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear me all right. I'm sorry Lucy couldn't make it, but I'm glad I got the opportunity to step in, and happy and honored to do it. And so first question, how many of you all are working on your own COVID-19 comics right now? Yeah, I thought so. Uh, I have an interesting perspective on all of this because I was a part of graphic medicine before there was graphic medicine. I'm sort of an accidental pioneer in the field, and I feel very honored and lucky to be so. And I'm lucky and honored to be here today. So thank you again. My graphic medicine journey began when my mom was diagnosed with metastatic cancer in 2004. There we go. Forgot how to work it. If you've read Mom's Cancer, you've probably never seen the real people. That's me, my sister, Nurse Sis, Mom, and Kid Sis. And I wasn't intending to tell the story, but the reason you've never seen that picture before, we thought about, my editor and I thought about putting that at the back of the book, the back cover or something. And for exactly the reason David was just talking about, we didn't want to show you what the real people looked like because we didn't want the reader flipping back and forth and saying, well, that doesn't look like his mom. That doesn't, he didn't draw her right. And now we wanted people to get connected with the cartoon characters and not worry about the real life. Scott McCloud's written about this too, about how a comic works. And I'm going to talk about this a little later because the reader has to bring themselves into it because a lot of visual information is missing. The reader has to fill it in. And we felt that way about that. But that's me, that's my mom, the third one over. And when my mom was diagnosed, I knew I wanted to tell our family story somehow, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do that. I'd been a newspaper reporter before. I'd been a kind of a freelance magazine journalist before. Man, I had a lot more hair back then. But I wasn't sure how to tell our story. And then one day I took my mom to chemotherapy. And if you and yours have been through chemotherapy before, it's boring. It's not very interesting. The patient sits in a chair. The chemos, they get the IV. There's usually a sedative in it, so they nap. And I knew that, so I'd taken along some paperwork to do. And when my mom was in the chair, I turned a piece of paper over and I sketched it. I sketched her. I did a drawing of her, and around the drawing, I put words of what was there that day. Not just the drug she was taking, not just the medication she was getting, but also the fact that she had a strawberry milkshake from Jack in the Box there, and she had a little video game in her lap she was playing. And I realized that in this one picture with words, a cartoon, right, that I captured more about what that day was like. I told my family story better than I could have told it in 5,000 words of prose. So I decided pretty much then and there that this was the medium for telling my family's story. I was going to tell it in the form of a comic. And I was also, I should say, I'm sort of a failed cartoonist too by this point in my life. I tried very hard to be a professional cartoonist as a young teenager and young man, and failed like a lot of people in a lot of creative fields. But I kept it up, did some freelance work. And so when, I had this insight, this opportunity, I was prepared. So I started drawing, and I didn't know what else to do with it. So I put it online because I just wanted to get our family story out somehow. And that was easy. It was cheap. It was immediate. And so I put it on a blog, or I actually bought the website and put it online. And told a couple friends about it. Go take a look at this. And they told two friends, and they told two friends, and they told two friends. And after a while, it went viral. Caught on, led to other things like, like the book, Mom's Cancer. And that was very gratifying. Now, there's an interesting difference. I learned something here in the early days. One is the difference between my intent and reader perception. My intent was to draw a roadmap for cancer patients and their families who might be following along behind us, to say, these are some things I experienced that I didn't expect. And these are some milestones you might look out for in your journey as well. And that happened. But there were some unintended consequences, and that was that healthcare providers found some value and some usefulness in it too. I got one of the first emails I got was from an Australian nursing instructor who basically said, We want to reprint some of your pages from Mom's Cancer because I want to give them to my trainees to teach them about the family dynamics they're going to face as they go out into the backwoods and into the outback and take care of people. And we all know that the World Wide Web is worldwide and instantaneous, but the fact that I could push a button here in California and have something go out on the web, and later that day someone in Australia reads it and says, I can use that. That was incredibly powerful to me. And it was an incredibly powerful demonstration of the power of this medium we're using right now. Also an incredibly powerful demonstration of what to me was sort of the nascent graphic medicine. Like, this is something people can use to make other people's lives better. Very powerful. And I started hearing from doctors and nurses and pastors and people who said that Mom's Cancer gave them insight into their patient's perspective and actually changed the way they'd be conducting their practices. I can't tell you how gratifying that was, what that meant to me. So a few years later, I got an email from a British MD, Ian Williams. And Ian says, hey, Brian, do you want to come to London for a graphic medicine conference? And I didn't know what graphic medicine was, but I was a free ticket to London. So I said, you bet. And so I went and I attended the very first graphic medicine conference in London. That's Ian with me in the first picture there, and a group of us. And I think there were about 70 people. I think it was a one-day conference. And that was just extraordinary. First of all, the fact that it was a venue where you get doctors and nurses and university professors and teachers and people like that together with cartoonists, and they're all talking about the same thing as equals. It was astonishing to me. We all had this love of the medium in common, this idea that this medium could be more than it currently was, that it could be used in this healthcare environment to tell people stories, to help people. It was immensely empowering. And I came home from London so excited, which is not usually the case for me coming home from a comic book convention. I got to tell you, I go to a fair number of comic book conventions, and I always come home just drained from them because it's people and it's noise and it's stuffy air and it's just they're kind of awful. And every graphic medicine conference I've been to, I come home enthused with new ideas about what to do and how to do it. And that's been true since. I helped in the early years of graphic medicine. I helped organize a few of the conferences, and I gradually formed some of my own ideas about how comics and graphic medicine work. Why comics? I think, first of all, I think comics are a powerful medium in which words and pictures combine to add up to something stronger, better than the sum of their parts. Comics distill reality to its essence. They chip away everything extraneous to polish that one gleaming gem of an idea that the artist wants to communicate. Comics are a very intimate medium. Very intimate medium. And they have this visual stylization that not only invites but demands empathy. And my favorite example of what I'm talking about is it's one I've actually seen Scott McCloud use before too. And that is Charlie Brown's face. Now, Charlie Brown's face it's two dots, blop, blop. It's a semicircle and it's a squiggly line. That's Charlie Brown's face. It's 4 ink blots on a piece of paper, and Charlie Brown can rip your heart out. When Charlie Brown doesn't get any Valentines, or the little red-haired girl breaks his heart, it'll break your heart. And when Charlie Brown has a victory, you're cheering for him. He's nothing but 4 little ink lines on a piece of paper, but you know, our minds fill in the details. We know Charlie Brown. We love Charlie Brown. And that's what I was talking about before with Mom's Cancer, and why we deliberately didn't want people connecting these cartoon characters with the real people, because the reader has to bring themselves to the story. And I think that makes a real strong connection. When a good comic's really working right, when it's really clicking, It can feel just like a direct tap from, the creator's brain into the reader's brain. It's a very powerful connection. And as I said earlier, especially when it happens, on the other side of the world kind of thing. Comics excel at metaphor and symbolism. It's their strong suit, and I noticed they spoke about this a little bit in the workshop that started today's activities. I agree with that completely. As I said before, readers have to meet a comic halfway. They have to interpret how the words and the pictures go together. And I just have a few examples from Mom's Cancer. I drew my mom as the character in the Operation board game because I just needed, first of all, I needed to deliver information. I needed to talk about her symptoms and the treatments. But this metaphor occurred to me because it sort of differentiates between my mom and the things we need to take out of her. It's the person is not the disease kind of thing. And it's also on 2 pages split in half like this because for the same reason the cover of the book has split into 2 panels, because I wanted to talk about or separate or differentiate between what's going on in her head, the brain tumor, what's going on in her lungs, the lung tumor. I wanted to kind of hint about, maybe we're talking about kind of a mind-body thing here, what's going on in your mind versus what's going in your body. How much of the body is the mind, kind of a Cartesian mind-body problem. That's all in there, and it's okay if the reader doesn't clock all those things, but you hope that somewhere in their subconscious, maybe that kind of thing settles in and they get a little more meaning out of it than just the mere text and the picture deliver. The text plus the picture together gives you more meaning than you'd expect. Dry mouth. So I think this oh, I got more examples, excuse me. The way I work, the way I make a comic is I usually script them out first, like a theater play or something. A lot of people draw the pictures first. I script first, and then I always go in and I look for opportunities to express those words through symbolism and metaphor. Like, for example, I might write something like my mom was drowning in a sea of medical jargon, which in itself is not good writing. It's kind of a cliche. It's an easy, it's an easy go-to. But I don't need to write it. I just draw it. I can draw my mom drowning in a sea of medical jargon, and the reader sees that. They click on it. They get it immediately. I don't have to say a word. There was a time we were taking my mom to a cancer treatment, to a radiation treatment, and as we're walking into the clinic, into the hospital, my mom says, "I feel like I'm walking into Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory." She literally said that. And now if you've ever been in a modern cancer clinic, they don't look anything like Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory. It's all white and stainless steel. They look like an Apple store. They're clean and antiseptic, but it felt like that to my mom. So it was very easy for me to draw what my mom felt. And, nobody looking at that is going to say, yes, that's what a modern cancer clinic looks like. But that was my mom's experience. And then again, if you've ever been through cancer treatment with you or your family, you'll recognize that the mesh mask she's wearing over her face is the kind of mask they use to bolt your head down to the table so you can't wiggle around while you're getting the radiation. So there's just that little gem, that little nugget of true experience in this otherwise outlandish hyperbolic metaphor. And I think this connection, this reader meeting you halfway aspect of comics is why so many of our best, most successful works of graphic medicine and even best-selling mainstream graphic novels in general, such as Mouse and Fun Home and Persepolis and even Smile by Raina Telgemeier, I think that's why they've been memoirs. And I think that's because comics work like the mind works. One of my favorite quotes about comics is by a cartoonist named Larry Gonick. And Larry said, "Our brains represent things in some stripped down, abstracted way. We don't remember things as photographs or movies. We remember them as cartoons." And I think that's exactly right. When you think back to an important memory in your life, you don't remember it in photographic detail. You don't remember, what color the carpet was, or what pictures were hanging on the wall, or what the drapes looked like. And you don't remember what somebody said to you verbatim, word for word, like an audio recording. You remember the important things. You remember nothing but the important part of how it made you feel, who was there, what happened, what you walked away with. That's a comic, that's a cartoon, that's reality distilled to its essence, is a memory. And I think that's why this works. I think that's why it works so well. So you say, fine, but why graphic medicine? What's it good for? Why bother? And over time, I've put together a list of 6 things I think graphic medicine does well. This isn't comprehensive or exhaustive. It's not particularly deeply thought out. Just consider these as a rough framework for future ideas, or just go read the Graphic Medicine Manifesto instead. I think graphic medicine is good for informing, and I think this is an overlooked aspect of it. Just information. Just as I said with mom's cancer, just drawing a map for somebody coming along behind you. Promoting public health, providing health data in an easily digested form. One of my favorite examples is this book, No Ordinary Flu, put up by King County, Washington Public Health by my friends Meredith Lee Volmer and David Lasky. And I noticed the subheader here says, also in this issue, how you can prepare for the current pandemic threat. They put this out years ago. And King County has put this out in, I'm not exaggerating, something like 40 or 50 different languages. They've given out thousands of these to people in the Seattle area about how to protect yourself from the flu. It's an extraordinary piece of public health work that I'd encourage you all to check out online. Simple stuff like how to wash your hands. We've all seen this one. And this is as simple and basic and clear as, the instructions on how to safely get out of an airplane in case it ditches in the ocean. But, and there's no story here, but it's important. One of the first people I met in graphic medicine is an Australian psychiatrist named Neil Phillips. And Neil used comics to teach public health to people whose first language was not English. I think that's extraordinarily important, and we're thinking about. And then there's graphics like the ones we've all seen the last couple months, flattening the curve. This is the kind of thing that a ordinary person could look at and with 15 seconds of explanation they get this. And it's been very important lately. And down at the bottom of my slide there, I referred to graphicmedicine.org COVID-19 comics. Go check those out. Graphicmedicine.org in general is a terrific resource, and they're putting together a collection of COVID-19 comics that are all well worth a look. So point 2, creating purpose. And by this, I mean wringing good from bad. I think, I was working on mom's cancer while my mom was going through her treatment for cancer. And she was very enthusiastic about mom's cancer and about me doing it. And I think that's because it gave her purpose. It gave her direction. It was her way of turning this horrible thing into something good. And I think, well, I don't know what else to say about it. Creating purpose is a good reason for the existence of graphic medicine. Related to that, self-interest. And by self-interest, I mean therapy, reflection, journaling, self-understanding, understanding what you're going through. I found, particularly with mom's cancer, but also Fire Story, that I didn't really understand what I'd been through, what had happened, what events meant, until I'd sat back and thought about, how am I going to write about this? How am I going to explain this? They say about teaching that the best way to master a subject is to teach it to someone else. And I feel that way about making comics too. You understand yourself better. You understand your situation better when you have to explain it to someone else. Some people use the word catharsis. They ask, and in fact, I think somebody already here asked, is it cathartic to make these comics? And I used to think it was. But my friend M.K. Zerwick and I have had some real discussions about that. And I hope someone gets the chance to follow up with her, because she argues, and I've come to believe, that it isn't particularly cathartic to make these comics about something traumatic you've been through. And the reason for that is, to make the comic, you've got to dwell in it. You've got to immerse yourself in it for quite a while. It takes a long time to make a comic. Rachel just posted a link to the King County flu comics I was talking about, so check those out. But you've got to wallow in it for a long time. I mean, honestly, my mom was diagnosed with cancer in 2004. I'm still talking about it. You know, my house burned down 2.5 years ago. I'm still going out and I'm book touring about every once in a while I get up in front of a bunch of strangers and I tell the story about how my house burned down. And I'm going to tell it again later too. I just thought of that. Sorry. Don't feel bad. But I'm not sure that's cathartic. I'm not sure that's healing. I think it's therapeutic, but I think you live longer with it that way than you might otherwise. You're just always sort of picking at that scab. So I'm wary of the word catharsis, although I understand what people mean by it. Distraction and action. Action versus helplessness. It keeps you busy. And this is sort of my first go-to answer when people ask you, well, why did you feel you had to make these comics? One reason was, I'm in this situation that I can't control. I can't cure cancer. I can't put out a firestorm. But in my world, in my narrative of that, I'm the god of that universe. I can decide how that goes. It gives me some illusory control over an uncontrollable situation. I think that's important. Patient care. Again, journaling, diary, self-care. I think Kathy Leamy, maybe I've seen papers people have done about the value of just handing a patient a blank book and saying, write down how you feel today, right? Just write down how you feel today, or draw a picture of how you feel today. Because a lot of people aren't comfortable writing words or poetry or song lyrics about how they feel. But anybody can draw a happy face or a frowny face, or anybody can draw a stick figure of them lying in a bed just feeling like crap. And I think it's an overlooked aspect of patient care. And again, kind of going back to some of the earlier things I said, I think it gives the patient not just something to do, but something important to do, something useful to do, to contribute to their own care, their own mental care, maybe even their own physical health, by doing graphic medicine. I think that's potentially important. So there's a sixth point on my list, but to get to it, I have to first tell you about the night my house burned down, which was October 9th, 2017. And that's a picture I took from the front yard of my house at about 1:30 on October 9th of a wall of fire coming down a canyon toward my neighborhood. And I really still wish I'd turned around and taken a picture of my house, because that would have been the last picture of my house I ever had. My wife Karen was awakened in the middle of the night about 1:15 by the howl of wind and the click of her clock turning off beside the bed as the power went out. And we immediately saw the peril and knew we had to evacuate, and we evacuated. And about an hour later, after we left, our house was burned down. The next day, I walked into our neighborhood. The damage was so extensive for the entire county that the police hadn't even blocked off the road yet. So I just walked in. I just walked into my neighborhood about 2 miles, and saw devastation. Um, and I'll have some pictures of that I'll show you in a minute. But the very next day, I went to I actually have some pictures. That's a picture of our firestorm taken from a nearby hilltop. And now the yellow lights in the foreground, that's just overexposed street lights, but all along the horizon there, that's all parts of my county on fire. And off to the right, that looks like, Mount Doom in the middle of Mordor. That's about where my house is. My house is about in Mordor there. And as I said, I walked in the next morning, and that's my street. And that's what I saw when I turned the corner and looked down my street. My house is on the left. Not that it mattered. So the next day, I went to a Target store about 20 miles away, which was the only thing open. And I bought shoes because I'd evacuated wearing stupid thongs because I'm an idiot. And I bought art supplies. And the only thing Target had was this crummy book of, pulp paper. I bought a Sharpie, a couple of Sharpies, and I bought some 4 colored markers. And I started drawing. Just as I had with Mom's cancer, I put it online because I didn't have any other outlet for it. And I just wanted to get the story out. And I do pictures like these. Now, I should say that this is something I don't tell everybody, but you guys will appreciate this because you're all creators, and I will expose my pathology to you. I think I'm not hooked up right, because even as I was walking into my neighborhood that morning, even before I knew my house was destroyed, there was a little part of my brain that's saying, pay attention because you're going to be telling this story. I've always felt like I had this sort of pair of eyes hovering over my shoulder, watching me watch what was going on around me. It's a real pain in the ass. And as I say, I think I'm not hooked up right. But as I walked in, again, even before I knew my house was gone, I was taking pictures like the one on the left because I knew I'd be drawing drawings like the one on the right. This is on the way. This is on the way to my street. A melted basketball hoop lying in the middle of the street. And stuff's still on fire, by the way, and I'm the idiot walking in there in sandals. That's my mailboxes melted on the corner. Yeah. And that is my house. And that's a drawing of me standing in front of my house. The only thing I could recognize from the curb is a refrigerator standing there in the middle of the debris there. And that's a drawing I made later of my family, my neighbors, all kind of standing out in the middle of the street watching this wall come at us. So as I said, I didn't know what else to do with it. So as I had with Mom's cancer, I put it online. I have a blog. I put it on my blog. Mentioned to a couple friends, and it also went viral. Something like 700,000 people went and saw that thing in the first week. And a PBS station in San Francisco, KQED, emailed me a few days later and said, hey, Brian, would you mind if we tried to animate that thing? And I said, knock yourselves out. I don't want to animate it. And so they did a little animated video you can find online. It's about 6.5 minutes long that NPR picked up, and something like 3 million people saw that video. And it won an Emmy Award too, so I got that going for me. And about a week later, my book editor emailed and said, hey, no pressure, but if you ever want to make that thing into a book, I'd publish it. And we did. I think David just posted the link to the KQED video. So I will immodestly take some credit for that kind of viewership and that kind of interest, that kind of intense interest I experienced during those days, which, by the way, was not the most important thing happening to me because my house just burned down. But what I really chalk that up to is people's need to hear a story. I had a lot of people tell me, I saw your fire on the news. I saw the mushroom cloud rising up above the plains of Santa Rosa, making its own weather as it went. But until I read your story, your fire story, I didn't understand what it was like to be there. And I think that's what I brought to the table. That's what I provided people, was I let them know what it was like to be there. And I think that's why they came, regardless of, whatever tools and skills and craft I brought to it. I think that's why people came to it. So people ask me how I could start writing and drawing a fire story the day after my house and 6,000 other houses burned down. In fact, while some of those 6,000 houses were still burning. And I reply that it didn't feel to me like I had a choice. The morning after the fire, as I said, as I was walking through my neighborhood, I felt compelled to tell this story. I knew I had to tell this story. And somebody later said it was my way of bearing witness. And I couldn't have said it any better myself. So that's my sixth point, is bearing witness. This idea of, I was there. This is what I saw. This is what happened to me. This is what it felt like to go through it. I think this is again, a strength of graphic medicine as well. This is what graphic medicine does so well, better than any other genre / medium, is bearing witness. I knew when my house burned down that I was an eyewitness to an historic event, and I had a responsibility or a compulsion to tell people about it. And so it kind of comes back around to what I was talking about at the start, the importance, the value, the great value of storytelling. It's one of the oldest, best impulses people have, just sitting around a fire telling each other stories. And that's why people responded so strongly to a fire story. And I think to Mom's Cancer before it, is they said to me, you captured exactly what it was like to go through that. You said things I felt and I didn't know how to say myself. That's the value of storytelling. That's the value of graphic medicine, I think. And one of the great things I love about comics, about graphic medicine, comics in general, is the extremely low barrier to entry. For the cost of pen and paper, or for the cost of a spiral-bound notebook of crappy paper and a couple of Sharpies, anybody can make comics. They can even be award-winning comics that get published, but they don't have to be. And I'll get to that too. I encourage people to make comics. That's what I do. I show them how to do it. I tell them how to do it. One of the points I really loved in the workshop this morning was it really doesn't matter how well or poorly you can draw. Just the example of XKCD, that webcomic, is an excellent one, because Randall Munroe has made a great career out of drawing the stick figures, because it's the idea. It's the idea that's important. He's so smart and his ideas are so good that stick figures are the perfect vehicle for that, delivering his messages. So I encourage people to make comics every chance I get. That's what I hope you do. And I hope it's what you encourage other people to do. And I would just urge you to remember that the point of graphic medicine isn't entirely to publish comics. I mean, it's nice to be published, but I think of graphic medicine as more of a process. It's an approach to practicing healthcare and practicing life. Doing it is what matters. It almost doesn't matter what happens to it after you do it. Doing it is what matters. And compared to doing it, no matter how good the writing or drawing are, how bad the writing or drawing are, or whether you can convince a journal to publish or print it, or a publisher to print it, that's irrelevant. That just doesn't matter. What matters is the doing. So here we are having a conference on computer screens because we are all eyewitnesses to an historic event. We're all living through this. We are all called to bear witness in our own way, to the extent we can and want to. And So I would urge you, this is my charge, this is my action call. Use graphic medicine to inform people who need information. Study graphic medicine, do the academic work to understand how it works and how it can work better and do more. Tell the stories. Help other people tell their stories. Make graphic medicine a part of who you are. Make it a part of your practice, part of your life. Do graphic medicine. Do graphic medicine and enjoy what looks like it'll be an excellent conference. And with that, David, I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody would have. I think if I click over to Q&A, maybe I'll see them. Yes.
Yes. Wait, can we just all virtually applaud you first? Can we first thank you for all those words and that insight? That was terrific. That was absolutely terrific, Brian.
Well, thank you, because I never know.
No, we were having a whole bunch of chatter and a whole bunch of reflection as you were going along, and I'm sure Twitter is doing the same. But yes, let's look at some of the questions, if you don't mind me.
No, I'm looking right at them here. Do you want to read them? Because I don't know what'll show up on the recording.
Yeah, let me do that. We can make this more of a back and forth. We have one from Elizabeth Argle, particularly focused on how did you manage rights when wanting to give permission to folks to use it, but also not making yourself untouchable by a future publisher. Now, we did hear what you said at the end, that the end goal is not just to publish. That shouldn't be the priority. But for working artists that do have publishing in mind, but also don't want to hold back, do you have any thoughts on walking that line?
Yeah, I thought this question was something else, and then I kind of read it again. How do you manage your rights when wanting to give permission to folks to use it? I was relatively indiscriminate when in the early days of Mom's Cancer, and in fact, I gave permission to weekly periodicals to just publish the whole darn thing. And when my publisher Abrams came along and said we'd like to make it into a book, I said, well, that's fine, except I've already given it away free to these people. Some of these questions are disappearing. Is that on purpose?
No, I actually, that's just me doing some behind the scenes.
Right.
I think you.
All right, good.
Along the way. So, sorry.
So I didn't think about it, and it really turned out not to be much of a problem. It was written into my contract with Abrams that, the San Diego Reader already has permission to publish the blah, 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 and the Nursing Council of Queensland, Australia already has permission to blah, blah, blah. But from now on, Brian, run things by us, please. That turned out to be okay. In general, there's been some evolution on this. It used to be that publishers were very wary of stuff that had already been online, particularly if you gave it away for free, because the rationale was, well, why would anybody pay for a book that they've already read for free online? And the answer turned out to be a lot of people. So a lot of cartoonists have done very well publishing collections of stuff that's already been online. Now, usually you end up having to take it offline, which, I had to do. I had to take Mom's Cancer off the internet, although it's back on at gocomics.com. I'm talking myself out of sales, but if you want to read Mom's Cancer in its entirety, go to gocomics.com because it's there. You manage it. I'm a little smarter about it now because Mom Cancer, I of course had no idea it would ever be published. So I was getting it out however I could to wherever I could. And, happily done doing so. We worked it out. It wasn't a problem.
It sounds like the most direct advice. I mean, it sounds like you're saying, first of all, don't let that be a barrier.
Yes.
Get it out there. But maybe also make sure it's retractable. Make sure it's in a space that you can.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair because a publisher very reasonably is not going to put a $17 sticker price on something that somebody can go read for free. I mean, they're just not going to do that. They're not going to want to do it. I think that's right.
I'll say as a scholar, it's really helpful to have as much of each channel as possible. I know when
Sure.
I was looking at your work, I was very interested whether the operation picture for your mom was originally two separate screens, two separate images, or if that was just necessity of printing the book. So I
It
thought,
was two
yeah,
separate. And in fact, I'll tell you a dirty little secret. If you put those two halves together, they don't exactly join up. Um, Mom's
yeah,
Cancer is horizontal. It's landscape shaped because when I was doing it as a web comic, that was the proportions of my computer monitor, and
yeah.
I knew people would be looking at it on screen. So I did it in this landscape format, which is unusual for a book, and that caused a few conniptions with my publisher, but we worked it out. But I was thinking of that's another piece of advice I'd give, by the way, that just occurred to me is be mindful of the medium your comic will be presented in and future media it may be presented in.
Mm-hmm.
I originally did when I did Fire Story as a web comic, I knew people would be looking at it on their phones. And so the original web comic of Fire Story has enormous, literal, relatively enormous type, bigger type than you would see in a printed comic book or a comic strip, because I knew people would be looking at it on a screen that was that big. And then when it came time to publish the book, I had to, and I knew I would have to redraw all those pages because the proportion of type to picture is very different. And plus, I wanted a chance to clean it up. When I drew the pictures for a Fire Story, I drew 18 pages in about 2.5 days, which, if you've ever drawn a comic, is just an incredible clip. And I accomplished that by drawing really, really poorly. So it has a sense of immediacy, which I think is its great strength, but it's not my best work. So for the book, I wanted to go back and pretty things up a little bit. But keep that in mind. And I made a mistake with Mom's Cancer that a lot of people make when they're doing work for online is, you all know sort of the native resolution of online world is 72 DPI. Well, I thought, well, I can work in 300 DPI and then just turn it into 72. 300 DPI is not good enough for print. So when it came time to make it into a book, I had to go back and digitally re-engineer the entire thing back up to 600 or 900 DPI as best as I could get it. So my advice to anybody out there who thinks maybe someday their stuff might be in a book is work it as high a resolution as you can, and then just shrink it down to whatever medium it's going to appear in.
We have a question from Naomi Bishop. Did you do any extra medical research in your process? Did you ever meet with a medical librarian before writing Mom's Cancer? How can medical librarians help connect others to graphic medicine?
I can answer half that question.
Cool.
I did a lot of extra medical research as well. I did a lot just initially as part of my mother's illness, just understanding and exploring her illness. I filled up binders full of stuff, material from everywhere I could find, just to understand what was happening to her, just as her son, who was going to be going to doctor's appointments with her. So I got a pretty good crash course on cancer just from that purpose. But yeah, when it came time to do the book, I did extra additional research. I'd actually talked to her physicians. Interview is too strong a word, but I'd kind of plumbed them to get the information I needed from them. I never did talk to a medical librarian because at the time I didn't know such things existed. That would have been a smart thing to do. And I've now that your question's gone, but the last one was
what can medical librarians do to promote graphic medicine?
I have no idea. I have no idea. Awareness is huge. Just being awareness and respect to, and this is a stigma. This is a hump, a speed bump. I think we're still in the process of overcoming. Is just gaining respect of medical professionals who say, well, why should we mess with comics? Why should we take up valuable space in our collection with a freaking comic book? Why should why should medical students have to spend 2 hours a week making comics? What's the point? This is the sales pitch we're still making, and people like M.K. Zerwick and Michael Green and others are championing so strongly and so well is making the case for graphic medicine. We're still making it, and it's been one of the coolest things of my career in this field that's just about 10 years old, to see it working its way into medical schools and curriculum and medical humanities, and people can get master's degrees in it now, and it's just wow. I mean, the pace has been breathtaking, but you really wish we were a little further down that road.
I think we're going to be addressing this a great deal all across the conference this weekend. I know we have library specialists and nursing specialists who will be able to talk to that. I mean, we have people right here in the chat, Alice Jaggers and Matthew No and Brittany Netherton, who will certainly be able to add to that issue of medical librarians. But I do want to shift back to a question asked by Katie Doty. She'd love to hear about how you balanced your mom's story versus your own voice, and what kind of input did she have when you were making the memoir?
Okay, I got a story.
Okay.
So when I first started putting Mom's Cancer online, I did it anonymously. I didn't sign it. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew who my family was. There are a couple of reasons for that. First, I was a coward. Second, I didn't want to do anything to increase the stress my family was going through in any way. I didn't want to add to anybody's pressure, thinking that, geez, Brian's over there making a comic about us. And there's sort of that whole anthropologist thing of not wanting the observed to know they're being observed. Like then they start changing their behavior, and you kind of want to be the guy hiding in the bushes taking notes. So I didn't tell my family about it at first. And then, as I had said, it went kind of viral. And by the way, I recognize the ethical dubiousness of that. It went viral. And I got an email one day from a guy who said, "Hey, I think I know your sister." I said, "Oh, shit." So I called everybody up. I called my sisters. I called my mom. And I said, "I've been working on this little thing. Go to this website, take a look at it, tell me what you think." And my sisters got back to me and said, "That's not how we remember it, but it's, you go ahead, you tell the story the way you want to tell the story." They were kind of cool with it. My mom called back and she loved it. The first thing my mom said when she saw Mom's Cancer was, "I can't wait to find out what happens next." And my mom always had a little bit of kind of a drama queen to her. And she also, and I mentioned this in my talk, I think she found a purpose in letting me tell her story about Mom's Cancer. So she was very happy to have me do it. Now, if my mom hadn't liked it, I would have killed the whole thing dead. I would have just that would have been the end of it if I'd made my mom unhappy about it at all. So how did I separate my voice versus Mom's story? First of all, I approached it as a journalist as best I could, understanding that as part of the story, there was objectivity was hopeless. I couldn't be objective about it. And in fact, a fair amount of the story is Brian not acting like Brian would usually operate because he's under this stress. His family's kind of cracking under this strain. But within that, I tried to be as objective as I could. I took a lot of notes. I wrote a lot of material, and anything that smacked of me feeling sorry for myself, anything that was about Brian, was out. Because although I'm a character in the story, I didn't want it to be my story. It's my mom's story. Nobody cares about me. I'm there, but it's my mom's story. And if something I wrote down didn't contribute directly to Mom's story, I cut it. And that's one of the reasons the book's only 128 pages is it could have been 300, but I just sliced everything out that didn't drive Mom's story. And so that was always uppermost in my mind. I was the most savage editor I've ever had. Mom did have some input, but she didn't do much. Although my favorite part of the book is the end, Mom's afterword. I think Mom's afterword is just kind of a masterful piece of writing that just says exactly what she wanted to say in a sort of an elegant, direct fashion. And so I love my Mom's afterward. But Mom didn't edit me. She didn't tell me to do something or not to do something, or maybe you ought to do this. She kind of left me alone to do my thing.
I want to I sort of want to piggyback on a comment that was made. It's sort of my own question, but something that was raised in the chat. Mia Mesmer pointed out that she's a scholar that researches webcomics. And she kind of hates that publishers don't somehow archive the web experience before going to print. I mean,
Yeah.
and I hear that. It also leads me to wonder, particularly based on the framework that you offer of the different things that graphic medicine can do. Do you feel there's anything innate to the comics medium, whether it's webcomics or print, but most immediately webcomics? Anything innate to the comics medium about dealing with crises? I mean, as you said, we're all in one now. You have, among your other works, including Whatever Happened to the World of Tomorrow, you have documented crises, personal ones, but also ones that we share through comics. Is this medium particularly adept for those moments?
Certainly in its immediacy. You know, I was that's you know, I sort of looked at a fire story as an old newspaper reporter / artist sending dispatches in from the front of a battlefield. You know, like the Spanish-American War, they'd had guys up there who were drawing stuff and getting them back to William Randolph Hearst to be published in the next day's paper. Immediacy, and I don't just mean being published quickly after the event that happens. I mean, there's a rawness and intimacy. I talked about the intimacy, this sort of mind meld that happens between the creator and the reader in a comic. And I think that's enhanced online. So I saw a comment go by. Somebody said that Hyperbole and a Half was a very different experience reading it as a bound book than scrolling through it as a web comic. I think that's very true. I think Mom's Cancer is a very different experience as a web comic as opposed to a book. When I did Mom's Cancer as a web comic, I published like an episode a week, so you'd have to come back every week to see it. That gives you a whole different pace of reading than just being able to, you know, knock it off in a setting. The answer is yes, but I can't really put my finger on it. I can't quantify it. Somebody'd have to, you know, analyze that a little deeper than I'm capable of at the moment. But
we're on it. We're going to do it.
It is its own thing. It is its own thing, and people, I respect that. And to the point of the question, a lot of times the creator, the artist, will archive their own version of the original web comic. And I know that in my case, and in the case of a lot of other people, I think the Library of Congress has established a repository, like a metaphorical salt vault somewhere of these old websites. They asked my permission to do Mom's Cancer, and I think they've archived it. I mean, I think it's at the Library of Congress for some of us. I don't know what their criteria for selection were, but I made it. But you're right. I mean, there's a loss there. There's definitely a loss there. Because the web is so ephemeral. It's just electrons, and it does go away. And it feels kind of like losing those 1920s black and white silent movies. It's just there's just a whole body of work out there that's evaporated in like the last 20 years of people doing great web stuff that's gone away. I wish that were preserved. I don't know how to do it.
Okay. The ever curious Matthew No does want to ask, have any works in progress that you can tell us about, Brian?
Yeah, I'm working on some stuff. Thanks for asking, Matthew. The first thing is we're putting out a paperback version of a fire story in this fall. And it's going to have 32 new pages of material, all new stuff, an update. So that's my immediate work, is just getting those 32 pages done. After that, I had 2 projects I was working on before the fire. And I think I might get back to one of them, and I think I'm going to let the other one drop because I'm just not, I'm not that guy anymore. You know, I'm not, I've changed. The fire changed me. It changed the way I look at my work and the kind of work I want to do. And sort of a related question is a couple people asked me well, I guess this COVID-19 thing's pretty good for you, huh? And I have no intention of doing a COVID-19 comic. I'll leave that all up to you. First of all, I'm tired. Second of all, I don't think I have any special insight that everybody else doesn't already have. We're going through this together. Your wisdom is as good as mine. I don't think I have anything to contribute to it. And one of the insights I got from a fire story, from doing that story, is the graphic work, the comics that are most worth doing, that are best received, that people want to read, are the ones that nobody on earth but you can do. You've got this little, there are a million people who can draw better than me, a million people who can write better than me, but there's only one me who can tell the stories only I can tell. And Mom's Cancer is one of those. A Fire Story is one of them. What Up in the World Tomorrow, I think, was one of them. But I don't feel that way about the pandemic. I don't think I have any special. I don't think I'm the only person who can tell that story. I think there are a lot of other people who have a lot of different, better angles on that than me. And I know there's probably about 20 of them watching this right now. So go get them.
Ariel Pompidus asks, is it uncomfortable when people talk to you about these deeply personal experiences as though they know what you went through? I mean, I did exactly that at the outset here. Ariel adds that sometimes I feel a little voyeuristic and have to remind myself that I don't actually know someone just because I read and relate to their experiences.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to be here. And I wouldn't, do book tours if I didn't want to talk to people about it. There's an interesting thing that happens to me, and I've talked to other, authors in my shoes. And this is weird. I don't talk about this very often, but again, we're all pros here. Is that you get this kind of dichotomy here, or I get a kind of dichotomy where I think about the people in my books as characters in books, and even I separate them from the real life people sometimes. Like, mom and kid sis and nurse sis, they're real people, but they're also just drawings I made in this book who have a life sort of divorced from what those real people are going through. And the same for, me and my wife Karen and my kids in the Fire Story is those people in their book, they got their own thing going on. It's a weird kind of split that gives me some separation. So it's not at all uncomfortable for me, but I recognize that discomfort in other people. A lot of people don't want to ask me questions that they think might make me sad or mad or set me off or send me into a spiral of depression. That's just not going to happen. I mean, my sort of, it's kind of my job, but I've also kind of got this, I got walls in place. I've got compartments. I'm fine. I can, my wife and I can, once a week, hardly a week goes by that my wife and I aren't sitting on the couch and we just look at each other and say, oh, we lost in the fire and we'll never see again for as long as we live. And we're genuinely, deeply grieving and sad over that. That's private. Telling you that story is public. And there's a difference. So, but I appreciate that. And it's good to be sensitive. And this whole idea of you don't actually know someone just because you read and relate their experiences, I think that's a really keen insight. In Mom's Cancer, there's a bit in the book where I'm angry with people smoking outside a cancer clinic.
Right.
That's not my best self. I'm kind of an asshole in that scene, and people have kind of called me on it before. They said, "Geez, you were kind of a jerk there." And the point is, you only think I'm a jerk because I showed you I was a jerk. That's the only way you know I was a jerk, is I had the self-awareness to portray myself as a jerk. So you don't know me. You know what I chose to show you, including the fact that on that day I was not my best self. And so there's this sort of authorial distance that is built into it that a lot of people don't get or don't see. They think you are the character. They think, and what you know about me is what I allow you to see, plus whatever conclusions you draw just from looking at me and say, "Dan, that guy's kind of a whatever he is." I don't. I got
Snappy
no.
dresser. A snappy dresser.
Thank you. This is yes. I figured I'm going to a conference. I might as well put on the button-down shirt and no
Looking
pants.
good. We have a question from MK Serwick.
My friend.
Heard of MK? Yes. Will Mechanical Monster come out in print?
Until recently, the answer to that was no, but now it's a maybe. Last Mechanical Monster is just a web comic I made. And again, it's on gocomics.com. If you're curious, you can go look it up. But it was sort of a reminder to myself, an exercise in pure fiction, that comics don't have to always be fun, but maybe sometimes they should be fun. And it's just a fun, dopey comic about an old 99-year-old mad scientist and his giant robot. That's it. It's 170 pages, and I just had so much fun doing it, and I loved it, and I loved the characters, and was surprised how many people got really into it, really connected to those characters in that situation. So nobody was ever interested in printing it, and that's fine. Not everything needs to be in print, but the answer now is maybe sometime, and I'll say more about that when I got something more to say than maybe. I don't want to pass by Kara's question here.
No, I want to get to Kara, particularly because Kara Dinzelit is part of the MCPHS University team and has been instrumental in building our graphic medicine collection. So I was absolutely going to highlight her question. Could you talk a bit about the use of visual metaphor in your comic? Is it something that comes to you as you're experiencing it in the moment or later upon reflection?
Both. If I think to myself, geez, this is like, then I remember what it's like. And if I can draw that, then I've got something. But as I describe my process, I'm a words first kind of cartoonist. I know cartoonists who are image first, and they'll just start drawing, and the story will emerge from the artwork. For me, that's voodoo. I don't understand how they do that. I need to have at least rudiments of a script. So I'll write it out, and I'll look for opportunities within the script to use pictures instead of words. My platonic ideal comic is one that's 50% picture, 50% word, and neither makes complete sense without the other. You've got to have them together to understand what's going on.
Sure.
So that's sort of what I'm aiming for. So I start with words, and then I look for opportunities to make, what's the 50% art? My favorite example is, again, from Mom's Cancer. I was writing it out, writing notes and stuff, and there's a part where I literally wrote on a piece of paper, balancing Mom's medications is like walking a tightrope. And that's a horrible cliche. I wouldn't dare put that in print as words, but I could draw it. And then in drawing it, I'm looking for it real quick, and I'm not finding it as quick as I want to. And then in drawing it, you don't have to explain. Here it is. You don't have to explain the cliche. You just draw Mom walking a tightrope, and then the rest of it can just be words about the medication she's taking and the exposition. But as the sequence progresses, things just start going to hell. There's oh, I went the wrong direction. There's a buzzard on the end of her pole, and you find out she's walking over an alligator tank and an elephant on the other end of the other pole, and then her rope catches on fire, and this whole thing's just going to hell because it can't balance all this stuff that's going on. That's a metaphor that came to me just because I wrote these words. Balancing Mom's medications is like walking a tightrope, and I spent 3 pages drawing my mom walking on a tightrope because that came to me, and I think it's honestly, it's one I'm kind of proud of. I mean, I think it works. I think the reader, that's a sequence where, to me, a comic's doing exactly what it should. Half words, half pictures, neither makes sense without the other, and the reader has to bring themselves to it to figure out the meaning. I think that's wonderful. I look for opportunities to do that every chance I can.
Fantastic. I do want to address Dana's question, too. This is Dana Walrath. What do you say to people who would like to say that though horrific experiences like the fires you lived through, war, genocide, and more are not matters of health and don't belong in graphic medicine? So just to push that a little bit further, mom's cancer, medical issue. Thus,
Yeah.
about it is graphic medicine. But we have explored and investigated how war, poverty, climate change, certainly something like Fire Story, may be part of graphic medicine. How do you determine in your own conceptualization of it what's in and what's out?
I say to hell with it.
Okay.
That's a smart ass answer.
No, it's okay.
I don't have much to say to those people. They can classify whatever they want as much as they want, anywhere they want. And I don't know if a Fire Story is graphic medicine, and I don't really care if it's graphic medicine. I mean, if you all want to invite me to a conference to talk about a Fire Story, I'll come. But I don't know. And I sometimes see academics really worrying about stuff like this. And I actually had a conversation with Scott McCloud about this kind of thing, because Scott McCloud is very much into categorizing 8 kinds of this or 6 kinds of that. And that's the only kind of comic that can ever possibly exist. And I'm arguing with him. It's like, that's very reductive, man. I'm one of my favorite life quotes of all time was from Orson Welles. And a movie critic once cornered Orson Welles and said, you know, can you explain your movie to me? What's the symbolism? What's the analysis? Tell me what your movie really means. And Orson said, I'm the bird. You're the ornithologist. You figure it out. And I think that's right. I feel like I'm the bird, man. I'm just telling the stories I got to tell. I'm just doing my thing. Whatever anybody wants to call it is their problem. As far as I'm concerned, that's the librarian's problem, the bookseller's problem, whatever shelf they want to put it on. I don't care. I'm doing my thing. And I think sometimes creators.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say sometimes creators can really hinder themselves, handcuff themselves by trying to hit that target by saying, "Oh, this isn't quite young adult enough," or this needs more of this to fit on that category. And that's important. You kind of want to think about that. You want to be practical and not make something that doesn't fit on any shelf at all, because then you're just shooting yourself in the foot. But I think there's a lot to be said for just doing what you want to do, tell the story you want to tell, and let everybody else sort it out after the fact.
So it shouldn't be the concern of creators necessarily to call their shot, to name the section or the category they be in. When you say it's academics or librarians or booksellers' problem, is it also their charge, do you think?
Yeah.
Do you feel that they have a license to attempt to categorize?
Sure. I mean, does Mouse belong with graphic novels, or does it belong with Judaica, or does it belong with World War II or Holocaust? Where do you put Mouse in a bookstore or a library? Where do you put it? I don't know. I would love, ideally, perfect world, the graphic novel would be on, Mouse would be in the wherever you'd find the Diary of Anne Frank. It'd be right next to the Diary of Anne Frank. That's where you'd find Mouse. But that doesn't happen. And there's some value, I think, for now, considering graphic medicine, graphic novels as a separate thing, even if occasionally that means you end up with Mouse sitting right next to Batman, that they have nothing in common, but there they are on the shelf right next to each other. I think that's kind of okay for now, but not ideal long term, not what I'd like to see. Gosh, I don't know the answer to that. But yes, it is the librarians and booksellers' charge, because you'd want them to have enough depth of understanding of the material to be able to recommend it to people, to say, oh, you're studying Holocaust memoir, let me show you this book called Mouse. You want to be able, they're the people who are going to bring the works to the customers, clients, people, readers. And I think it's a very important function. And I think the creator can make that easier or harder for them.
There's an argument going back to what you said earlier, that if we're operating in the digital space, something can live in multiple sections at once. That it can be tagged with multiple things. It's when we come down to the print product that has to be purchased and literally placed somewhere that those divisions have to become, unless you're buying multiple copies, unless you're putting.
Yeah, who's going to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have seen some disasters too. I've been in, a bookstore and I've seen a piece of a graphic novel. I can't think of it right now, but a graphic novel sitting back in the biography section where nobody was ever going to find it there. Nobody's going to look for it there. That's not doing anybody any favors. A lot depends on an aware bookseller or librarian understanding what they have and respecting its value.
Thank God it was wrapped in plastic, but I once found Alan Moore and I believe the artist named Melinda Gibby. I could be wrong on that. They're Lost Girls.
Yeah.
Wrapped in plastic in the children's section.
Oh, God. Yeah, because it's a comic. Well, talking about sort of the stigma or whatever, some of these barriers we're all overcoming. I will still occasionally get an email or a message or a Facebook note or from somebody who says, how dare you make fun of your mother's cancer? How dare you make fun of your neighborhood burning down?
Interesting.
Because in their mind, a comic, it's right there in the name. It's supposed to be funny. And occasionally you can get somewhere trying to educate and say, well, no, comics isn't a genre, it's a medium, and it can tell a fiction or nonfiction or adult or juvenile or funny or serious. It's just a way of telling stories, like movies and books and theater plays are ways of telling stories. You can try that. Some people, it's just impenetrable because the last comic they read was, Casper the Friendly Ghost when they were 5 years old. Some folks don't get it, and that's sort of the hump we're still overcoming, and why I love these conferences so much.
Brian, let me put you on the spot because we're coming towards the end of our time together. What are you reading?
Oh, golly. What am I reading right now? Just to kind of in these days of gloom and doom, I'm really enjoying David Sedaris. I buy David Sedaris. These light, funny essays that sort of usually have a little heart or a point, and I find that fits my mood wonderfully. Generally, I read nonfiction more than fiction. It's just sort of the way I aim. I'm trying to think of some good graphic novels I could recommend. I got a whole shelf full of them back there, but everything by my friends, everything by M.K. Zerwick and Ian Williams, all that stuff.
Good, they're covered.
Yeah, they're all good stuff. Just trying to keep it light these days, I think that's appropriate.
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to end things prematurely at all, but you've given us so much time, and you've been really generous with your insights and with sharing your experiences, not only in this talk, but also in this art. I'd like to once again prompt the chat room to offer some applause to our keynote speaker today. And as they are doing that, I want to remind everyone that we will continue in a little over a half hour's time with our first panel that is going to be directly addressing the COVID-19 crisis in terms of comics. So I hope you will come back or stay around. Brian, I hope you check it out if you have the time today.
I will. I'll be in and out all day long. I'm loving this. This is wonderful.
But you certainly did not disappoint. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm glad I was able to step in and get it done. Thank you.
Very good. I am going to end the recording. If people would like to join us further, please see our additional links. And thanks.